My name is Evelyn Carter, and the morning my husband brought me breakfast to my office was the moment my life quietly fractured. If I had eaten that meal, my daughter would never have existed. It was just after 8, the kind of early American morning where the city still moves half asleep, lights on in glass towers, coffee in every hand. I was already at my desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, reviewing reports before the building fully woke. When Julian Carter walked into my office carrying a stainless steel food container, I knew something was wrong. In 3 years of marriage, my husband, CEO of one of the fastest-growing investment firms in the country, had never shown up unannounced. Not with coffee, not with flowers, certainly not with breakfast. He claimed to have cooked himself. He smiled when he saw me. A careful smile, the kind that looks warm until you look at it too long. "Happy anniversary," he said. 3 years. I wanted to do something nice for you. He set the container on my desk. The smell hit immediately. Heavy, rich, overpowering. My stomach twisted hard. 4 weeks, I'd been fighting relentless morning sickness, the kind that turns familiar scents into threats. Julian didn't know I was pregnant. No one did. I was 35 years old, newly carrying a life I had been told might never come, and my body had become a secret I guarded carefully. I folded my hands together to keep them from shaking. "Eat while it's hot," Julian said softly. I made it myself. Something about the way he said it made the room feel smaller, tighter. His eyes didn't leave my face. He wasn't offering. He was watching. In that moment, I didn't feel loved. I felt observed. And without understanding why, a quiet instinct rose in me, sharp and undeniable. This wasn't a gift. It was a test. Before that morning, I believed my life was stable. I was Evelyn Carter, Senior Operations Director at Carter & Hale Investments. The woman who worked late, solved problems, and stood calmly beside a powerful man. People assumed my life was glamorous. It wasn't. It was orderly, controlled, earned through patience. On paper, Julian and I were impressive. He was admired by investors. I was trusted by the board. Together, we looked untouchable. But behind closed doors, something had shifted months ago. Conversations shortened. Silences stretched. Questions about finances sounded less like curiosity and more like audits. Julian spoke often about risk, about protection, about how emotions made people dangerous. I told myself it was stress. What I didn't know, what I couldn't yet name, was that my husband had stopped thinking like a man building a family. He was thinking like someone protecting a fortress. And in his world, even an unborn child could become a threat. Her name was Lila Monroe. She had joined the company 3 months earlier as an executive assistant assigned to my floor. Young, polished, and carefully ambitious, Lila moved through the office with a confidence that felt practiced, almost rehearsed. She dressed sharply, spoke softly, and paid attention to everything, especially Julian. I noticed it in moments small enough to dismiss if I wanted to. The way her posture straightened when he entered a room. How her voice softened when she spoke his name. How her laughter came too easily, even when nothing was funny. That morning, when Julian stepped out of my office to take a call, Lila appeared in the doorway holding a thin stack of files. Her eyes went straight to the food container on my desk. "That smells amazing," she said with a smile. "You're so lucky." My stomach rolled again. I knew I couldn't open that lid without being sick. The thought alone made my throat tighten. I returned her smile, calm on the surface, exhausted underneath. "I already ate earlier," I said. "I'm completely full." She hesitated, glancing down the hallway, checking whether Julian was still nearby. I saw the calculation flicker across her face. "It would be a shame to waste his effort," I added gently. "You haven't had breakfast yet, have you?" Her face brightened instantly. "Oh, no," she said. "I didn't have time." "Please," I said, sliding the container toward her. "I insist." She didn't ask again. "Thank you, Evelyn," she said, lifting it carefully, almost reverently. "I'll make sure it doesn't go to waste." As she walked away, I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Relief washed through me. The nausea eased. My hand stopped trembling. I told myself it was nothing. Just food. Just another strange moment in a demanding life. I did not know I had just passed something deadly into another woman's hands. Less than an hour later, the sound came. At first, it was dull. A heavy thud from the open office area, like a chair tipping over. I paused, pen hovering above the page, trying to decide whether to ignore it. Then the scream cut through the floor. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't fear. It was pain, raw, uncontrollable, tearing through the air with a violence that made my chest seize. I stood so fast my chair slid backward and ran toward the sound. Lila was on the floor beside her desk. The container lay on its side. Food spilled across the carpet. The smell was overwhelming now, mixed with something sour and metallic. She was clutching her stomach, her body curling inward, face drained of color, lips trembling, eyes unfocused. Then I saw the blood, dark, spreading, unmistakable against the pale carpet. Someone screamed for an ambulance. Someone else started crying. Phones came out. Hands shook. I stood frozen, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. This can't be happening. That was when Julian appeared. He stepped out of his office quickly, but he didn't rush to her. He stopped several feet away, staring at the blood on the floor. His face changed in seconds. Shock gave way to fear. Fear hardened into something colder. Then his eyes lifted and locked onto me. And in them, I saw no concern. Only anger. And disappointment. Julian crossed the space between us in long, rigid strides. He didn't look at Lila again. He didn't ask if she was conscious. He came straight for me. His hand closed around my arm, tight enough to hurt. "What did you do?" he demanded under his breath. His voice shook, but not with panic. With fury. "Why her?" The words landed wrong. Not what happened. Not is she okay. Why her? Something inside me went cold and perfectly still. I understood then, before sirens, before explanations, before anyone said the word poison. He wasn't asking why this happened. He was asking why it hadn't happened to me. The ambulance arrived fast, though time felt warped, stretched thin by shock. Paramedics worked quickly, lifting Lila onto a stretcher. Her face was gray, her breathing shallow, an oxygen mask pressed over her mouth. Julian followed them without a backward glance. He never asked if I was all right. At the hospital, the waiting room was harsh and brightly lit, the kind of place where hope feels fragile and temporary. Julian paced like a trapped animal, running his hands through his hair, stopping only to glare at me as if my presence irritated him. When the doctor finally approached, the room fell silent. He spoke carefully, professionally. Lila had suffered acute poisoning. She was stable, for now, but there had been severe internal bleeding. The substance identified was misoprostol, administered in a dangerously high dose. I frowned. The name stirred something distant in my memory. The doctor continued, voice steady. "It's a drug used to induce uterine contractions. In this case, it caused an immediate miscarriage." Julian went pale. Then the final sentence fell. She was approximately 6 weeks pregnant. The air left my lungs. 6 weeks. Julian collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. But as I watched him, I felt no shared grief. What I saw wasn't loss. It was calculation unraveling. In that sterile room, the truth assembled itself piece by piece. Lila had been pregnant. The food had been poisoned. And I was still standing, which meant I was never meant to be there. Police arrived soon after, asking calm, methodical questions. Who prepared the food? Who touched it? Where it had been kept? I answered honestly. I had opened the container. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't added anything. I gave it to Lila. Julian told his version. He said he cooked it himself. Said it never left his sight until he placed it on my desk. Said I was alone with it for nearly an hour. He thought he had built a perfect trap. But traps fail when facts don't cooperate. The toxicology report came back quickly. The drug wasn't sprinkled in. It wasn't added later. It had been dissolved thoroughly while the food was still hot. Prepared that way. From the beginning. I looked at Julian then. Really looked at him. That breakfast had never been meant for Lila. It had been meant for me, for my body, for the child growing quietly inside me, the nausea that embarrassed me, the weakness I tried to hide. None of it was a flaw. It was the reason my daughter was alive. Lila wasn't the target. She was collateral damage. And the man I married had planned to erase his own child to protect what he valued more. In that moment, fear left me. Something sharper replaced it. Focus. I didn't confront Julian after that. I didn't accuse him. I didn't cry. I didn't demand explanations that would only teach him how to lie better. Instead, I did what years in executive rooms had trained me to do. I watched. I listened. And I remembered everything. I let him believe I was shaken, small, confused. I spoke less, avoided his eyes, allowed fear to become a costume he thought I wore naturally. That illusion was useful. Within hours, his control began to crack. He checked his phone constantly, took calls in stairwells, lowered his voice whenever I entered a room. The man who once dictated every outcome now moved like someone racing against time. That was when Maya Chen stepped in. Maya had been my assistant for years, long before my marriage. She knew my silences, knew the difference between exhaustion and danger. I asked her, quietly, to pull security logs from the parking garage and internal cameras. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would trigger alerts. What she found mattered. Julian's car had entered the building nearly an hour before he came up to my office with the food. 60 unaccounted minutes. Too long for traffic. Too long for coincidence. Then another clip appeared. A man using the emergency stairwell instead of the main exits. He carried a black trash bag, moving carefully, deliberately. His face was partially obscured. His posture wasn't. It was Julian's personal aid. I stared at the screen, one hand resting instinctively on my stomach. People don't hide trash, unless they're hiding guilt. And suddenly, the picture sharpened. This hadn't been impulse. It had been planned. Once I understood that, I stopped seeing Julian as my husband. I analyzed him the way I would any executive under investigation. Maya and I follow the only trail that never lies, money. At first glance, everything looked ordinary. Reimbursements, consulting fees, legal retainers, the kind of vague categories companies hide behind every day. But when we lined them up month by month, a pattern emerged. Large transfers, identical amounts, always routed through the same small management firm. A firm that didn't exist beyond paper. Its address was a rented mailbox. Its phone number forwarded to a private line. Its registered agent was Julian's aide. From there, the money moved again. Straight into rent payments for a luxury apartment across the city. Private parking. Concierge service. A building no junior assistant could afford. The apartment belonged to Lila. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. While Julian lectured me about tightening expenses and protecting our future, he had been financing another woman's life. The clothes, the confidence, the quiet entitlement, none of it was earned. It was funded. People call affairs emotional. This wasn't emotional. It was logistical, deliberate, documented. When someone hides money, they're not just hiding betrayal. They're hiding intent. And intent always leads somewhere darker. By the time I opened my eyes again, my decision was clear. I wouldn't confront him at home. I would dismantle him where he felt untouchable. Inside the systems he believed belonged to him. Once I understood it was planned, I stopped seeing Julian as my husband. I analyzed him the way I would any executive under suspicion. Maya and I follow the only trail that never lies, money. At first, everything looked ordinary. Reimbursements, consulting fees, legal retainers, the kind of vague categories corporations hide behind every day. But when we lined them up month by month, a pattern appeared. Large transfers, always the same amount, always routed through a small management firm I had never heard of. The firm didn't exist beyond paper. Its address was a rented mailbox. Its phone number forwarded to a private line. Its registered agent was Julian's personal aide. From there, the money moved again. Straight into rent payments for a luxury apartment across the city. private parking, concierge service, a building no junior assistant could afford. The apartment belonged to Lila. I sat back slowly, my hand resting over my stomach. While Julian lectured me about tightening expenses and protecting our future, he had been using company funds to build another woman a life. The clothes, the confidence, the quiet entitlement, none of it was earned. It was financed. People call affairs emotional. This wasn't emotional. It was logistical. And when someone hides money this carefully, they're not just hiding betrayal. They're hiding intent. There was only one question left. How did Julian get the drug? Misoprostol wasn't something you picked up casually. It required access, knowledge, and someone willing to break the rules. Maya found the name first. Sophia Grant, a licensed pharmacist. An old classmate of Julian's from years ago, back when ambition still looked like charm. They dated briefly, long before he married me. We met in a quiet coffee shop tucked off a side street. Cameras, low music, no illusion of privacy. Sophia arrived confident, sunglasses still on indoors. She smiled like this was a reunion. I placed a printed image on the table between us. A security, still showing her handing a small package to Julian's aide in an alley 2 days before the incident. Her smile collapsed. "You know what this is," I said calmly. "And you know what it cost." She tried to deny it, claimed it was paperwork, claimed I was reaching, but her hands were shaking. "Julian won't protect you," I continued. "If this comes out, he'll sacrifice you first." Silence stretched between us. Then her shoulders dropped. "He said it was to end a pregnancy quietly," she whispered. "He said it was his wife's child." In that moment, she understood she hadn't helped a man in trouble. She'd helped commit a crime. The board meeting started at 9 sharp. Julian sat at the head of the table, suit perfect, voice steady, playing the role he'd mastered for years. To anyone watching, he looked untouchable. When the vote was about to begin, I stood. Before anyone could stop me, the screen lit up with bank transfers, shell companies, apartment payments. Then I played the recording. Julian's voice filled the room, cold, controlled, discussing how to make a miscarriage look natural, how a pregnancy was a problem. Silence followed. Security moved before Julian could reach the projector. The vote was unanimous. Police entered the room. As the handcuffs closed, Julian looked at me, not with regret, but realization. 6 months later, I was back in the same hospital. This time, I wasn't there for loss. I was there to give birth. When my daughter cried, strong, alive, I understood something clearly. The nausea that saved me wasn't weakness. It was protection. I named her Grace, not because life was gentle, but because I was spared, and because survival sometimes means standing up in a room where you were never meant to speak. People often ask me how I knew something was wrong that morning. The truth is, I didn't know. I felt it. There's a quiet voice inside us that speaks long before proof appears. We're taught to ignore it, to be polite, to be reasonable, to not overreact. I almost did the same. If I had ignored that feeling, my story would have ended very differently. What I learned is this: power doesn't turn people cruel. It reveals who they already are. When someone starts seeing love, loyalty, or even a child as an inconvenience, believe them the first time. Julian lost his freedom. He lost his reputation. He lost the empire he thought would protect him from consequences. I gained my life back. My daughter will grow up knowing she was wanted, protected, and chosen. Not as leverage, not as a threat, but as a human being. If you're listening to this and something in your life feels off, don't wait for proof to respect your instincts. Distance yourself. Protect yourself. Ask the hard questions. Sometimes survival looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away. And sometimes it looks like standing up in a room where you were never meant to speak. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. This is the art of revenge, not about hurting others, but about reclaiming your life.